Welcome to the Albuquerque Journal's Business Outlook podcast. CNM is truly one college with infinite possibilities in tech and data sciences. CNM offers programs where everyone can learn about software, apps, or how to build websites. You can also choose from AI programs and machine learning, the Internet of Things, and so much more. CNM, one college, infinite possibilities, and a proud sponsor of the Albuquerque Journal's Business Outlook.
Hey everyone, welcome to Business Outlook, the Albuquerque Journal's podcast focused on all things business. I'm your host, Matthew Narvaiz, staff writer with the Journal. Before we get to questions and our guest, Kristelle Siarza Moon, just a quick update on the podcast going forward. So we're transforming what was Tech Outlook into a more wide-ranging podcast that will touch on real estate, emerging leaders, small business and tech. So the tech part isn't going anywhere. We'll just have more topics and, more people to bring on from different backgrounds onto the show. But now that we got that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Kristelle Siarza Moon, owner and CEO of Siarza, and also the volunteer executive director of the Asian Business Collaborative. She's a fan of the 49ers, I believe Marvel, and a big advocate for all things New Mexico. Kristelle's going to be our first small business-focused guest. Kristelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so honored to be the first one. I really hope I don't embarrass you or embarrass myself.
We'll just sort of start off. Tell me a bit about the company, Siarza. Talk to me about the Asian Business Collaborative, and we'll sort of go from there.
Oh, for sure. So in 2014, I woke up on my ex-boyfriend's couch and I said, what did I do? And yes, this is always part of the spiel of Siarza. I left an agency and I had been exploring various different ways of where I take my career. And I felt like it was definitely my time to open up a business. And so I opened up Siarza, which at the time was called Siarza Social Digital. And we were very focused on social media and advertising and web design and development. And so throughout the years, our agency has grown. And we're about to celebrate our 10th year, which is so exciting. And we have 20 members on our team across here in the United States and here in the Philippines, and also in the Philippines. Being a proud Filipino American, my mission is to help create jobs. So it was great to really support my home country or my roots. And so during the pandemic, I said to myself, well, we had a good run. I thought the business was going to close. We had such challenges. We understood small businesses were challenged at that point. Every business owner really showed their true colors at that moment in time. And then all of a sudden, I just worked my network and got the support that I needed. I talked to the SBA. I talked to DreamSpring. I talked to various different resources in the community, and those names are really relevant towards today's conversation. But so roughly March 15th was when the pandemic had really started to shut everything down. And then by April 1st, I had my first round of PPP funding. And so I was fortunate enough to have the right resources. But I looked around the corner and I looked around various different businesses. And I realized that a lot of Asian-owned businesses didn't have the resources that I did. So from there, the Asian Business Collaborative was born. The Asian Business Collaborative really focuses on case management, education, and advocacy wrapped around language access, social justice, economic development. All of those different elements really bring the Asian Business Collaborative to life. So I've been really privileged to have this nonprofit now for 4 years. And it's not my nonprofit. It's the Asian community's nonprofit, especially since they really didn't have a voice in the business community for quite some time. So I'm honored to be here and really talk about it and also talk about some of the other things I've learned as a business owner as well.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that you also used to work here at the Journal.
Yep. Yes, I did. I walked through the halls and I even made an Instagram story really quick. So I used to, there's 2 times actually. And I didn't realize that you didn't know the first part. So, 2006, I was an intern at the Albuquerque Tribune. And so the APC office was always the thing. I used to drive one of the cars and I used to mess around and go to the cafeteria, like the Wall of Fame, and then go see the people in the printing presses. They were really awesome. And then in 2009, I was working for Clovis News Journal as an advertising rep after I had my kiddo, who's now 16. That kind of gives you a timeline idea. So at the Journal, I took a job. It was really funny because instead of going right, which is where the Tribune was, I went left to the advertising room. And so I sold advertising. And so my territory, we had territories back then. And my territory was selling the North Valley. So like the little small mom and pops. And that gave me a really good sense of like what it was like to be a business owner, because I would just sell them advertising, right? So like the Business Outlook was always a really good piece for us to sell. And then fast forward, an opportunity came up, and I was one of the, as Don Friedman, your managing editor, had said, or one of your editors, he's like, oh yeah, Kristelle was one of our first digital people. And I giggle about it because it was so archaic back then, like selling boxes on the website, or selling like packages and digital marketing stuff. And and that's when I realized, God bless the woman that was my manager at the time. I believe her name was Sarah. I was such a pain in the ass of an employee. That's what I do. I was like, I think I'm better off as a business owner. But I loved my time at the Journal. The editors are really great here, and the management has just changed over the years. And so it's really nice to see this massive transition to the Journal. Like if you told me 16 years later that I would be here filming a podcast with you, I'd be like, you're nuts. So just to even see the Albuquerque Journal as a business transition over the years has been really incredible.
You know, so the reason we brought you on today is you were in D.C. this month, talking small business and the economy, and you were representing the Asian Business Collaborative. You know, let's start there. I mean, what took you to D.C. exactly? I mean, what was the focus?
Yeah. So there was ABC's actually has an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with National ACE. And National ACE is a Asian entrepreneur and commercialization organization, basically the Asian Chamber, the National Asian Chamber. And because we've had a good relationship with them, they were looking for business owners and multicultural chambers of commerce to actually represent in DC. And they have these events from the White House Public Engagement Office called fly-ins. The community flies in. They unfortunately have to pay for it on their own, but they fly in and they can either tour the White House, because as the White House says, this is your house, right? So you can actually go to the White House. You can meet with significant business leaders or Department of Justice folks. Like, it has nothing to do with our federal delegation. It actually is more of like, okay, here is your executive branch, and we want you to meet the executive branch. So fast forward, several groups, including like Main Street America, Small Business America Progress, Public-Private Strategies, they all were kind of the connectors to us in the White House. And they said, hey, as a leader in the Asian business community, we want you to come in for our Southwest. I'm going to mess up the name. Sorry, I'm like looking at what the name of the thing is. Give me a second. Sorry, I don't want to mess this up. Okay. Let me start over really quick. So the White House invites us over for the White House Southwest Regional Business Briefing. And the business briefing entailed a really aggressive but really small business friendly agenda of just highlighting the various different departments and initiatives and milestones that they've done for small business owners. And the reason why it was Southwest is only 4 states. It was New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Nevada. Utah mattered, but they weren't there. And so it was really great to actually, so there's different things, right? Like learning about advocacy. There's some businesses that have never stepped foot in the White House to advocate for themselves or advocate for their business. Some folks have never even been to the White House before. I was fortunate enough to go for the Lunar New Year event with the Asian community, but not in a true executive visit style. So so our agenda included meeting with I know that was one of your next questions, right? So we met with the SBA administrator, Isabel Casillas Guzman. She's actually been to New Mexico several times, thanks to the district office. I'm sure that
I had the chance to get to meet her, I believe, last year.
Yeah, and and there's other people, but I want to point out Secretary Guzman for a minute. Like, isn't it crazy how she feels like she's one of us in New Mexico, right? Like, what was your impression when you met her?
Yeah, I mean, she seemed very much so at home here, which, typically with, people of that caliber, it's kind of just a quick stop in, a wave at people. But no, she definitely seemed at home whenever I had the chance to interview her.
Yeah, and she's not from here, right? But I think that's what, one of the things that they talked about was these massive sweeping changes onto SBA, making the website more friendly, expanding departments so that way they really touch small business owners. But I think it really came from those types of visits where she would come in and talk to you and talk to folks. She really understands the needs of a community like ours, because I think it's just because she relates to us. And that's what the whole mission of that trip was. Like, they want to know, not only can we relate to you, we're listening to you. And we know that we need to make the SBA, the U.S. Treasury, the government just more customer focused. And when they said that, I was like, no way. Are you kidding me? Because it can be very difficult. But anyways, some of the other folks that were in the room was the deputy secretary of Treasury, Wally Adiamo, super sweet dude. I'm calling a secretary a dude, but whatever. Wally was incredible because the first thing he said was, "Thank you for being a small business owner." And to us, the small business owners, when you hear that, you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. And he goes, you all are the heartbeat of our community. You're the ones that fund the Little League sponsorships that are the connectors in the community. And when he said that, I said, he gets it. He really gets it. And he's never been a business owner, but he understands that, especially in the U.S. Treasury, they have way more important things to worry about, like federal debt, taxes, et cetera. But he was willing to talk to us like he was one of us. It was really cool. And other folks that I wasn't expecting, but it was really great to actually talk to, was John Podesta, the White House senior advisor to the president of Clean Energy and Innovation. And this one seemed incredibly relevant to New Mexico because he was talking about how, in order for our communities, and I'm not paid by the federal government to say this, like, I'm not like advocating to be the spokesperson here, but it made sense what he said. He said, the Clean Energy Act and the clean initiatives that we have, they can be initiatives, but they're only as good if the public sector doesn't get behind it. It's worth nothing, right? So it was really great for him to acknowledge the fact that, like, do you need capital for clean energy incentives for your buildings, for solar, your fleet vehicles? If you decide to do an all electric fleet, like, you should be getting credit incentives. The loans don't have a cap anymore. Like, those are the things that small business owners needed to hear. And it was really great to be in the room and really hear from, and then of course a phenomenal panel by the SBA afterwards. But hearing these folks kind of talk about what are the needs of a small business owner and speaking our language was made the DC trip awesome. Awesome.
So did you have a chance to speak on a panel, to some of these DC officials, or were these conversations more so, individual one-on-one conversations?
It's way above my pay grade. So we were in a room at the Eisenhower Executive Office, and we were in a room of about 50 business owners, EDOs, as we call it, economic development organizations. So about majority of them were small business owners. And there was a couple folks, like the Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce was there. I was there. There was some folks that were like small business like associations, like the Farm Export Association was there. But my favorite part was meeting other business owners that were business owners from here. Family Friendly New Mexico was in the room. So no, we weren't part of a panel, but it was incredibly engaging. And normally when you say, okay, we're being invited to the White House, you're like, okay, so you can sit down, you got to behave, you got to be all proper. But no, it was really great because they were like, Mr. Adiamo, Wally, right, from the Treasury, he goes, I want to have a conversation. People spoke up, right? And so in the SBA's portion, we had an individual that was in charge of the state programs and specialized programming. Like on August 9th, they have a specific program where they're reaching the Native American communities because they're often forgotten in the conversation of business. So she was talking about her initiatives. We were the SBA panel for policy had a member of the policy team. They had a member of federal contracting, 8A, WSOB, veteran businesses. And then there was another person that was emergency disaster relief. Like immediately I thought of Ruidoso, like this gentleman needs to get out there. But he helps with those types of business recovery efforts, like the EIDL grant. And then the other person was talking about just, your 504 loans and then other access to capital. And the big message that the SBA had was access to capital, more friendly, and we want to hear from you and what are the stimulus challenges. So if you haven't noticed, I'm not shy. So I asked a lot of questions and I didn't care that I like bombarded the mic. I was like, hey, why is it that in order for you to use the SBA, you have to be a citizen? It makes sense. I said that very gracefully. I was like, it makes sense. But like, if you're serving the Asian community and you want to serve the Asian community, I can't offer any of our SBA programs. What do I do? And like, let me tell you about the non-citizen stuff later, because that was something that they took away from. And then I said, how's your language access stuff? Like, I can't really use this. And I use the example of how the Asian Business Collaborative hosted with the LA office and the New Mexico office. We hosted a multicultural, multi-language SBA event talking about the different programs that we have. And they were like, oh, we've never seen that before. Mm-hmm. You've never seen that before? Come on. Like, how many times do you walk into a business in New Mexico and it's Spanglish, right? Like, how many times, if you go to the international district, you'll be lucky if you get by with a little bit of Vietnamese. Like that was, I think, what we all took away from is that Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado are so much more, and Nevada especially, like we are so much more diverse that language access was a problem that SBA is overcoming. So it was really great to talk to them about that.
Let's talk about access to capital for small businesses. I mean, what sort of federal initiatives or state initiatives are out there that, maybe a company like Siarza has used, or maybe something you learned on your trip to DC?
Yeah. So it was great to have the emergency disaster loan team there. And we needed it, right? During the pandemic, an EIDL loan helped us float by, and my P&Ls, my profit and loss statements were negative during the pandemic because rather than not paying my employees, I kept them on board. But I also knew that other businesses needed us, but they just couldn't pay us. But they needed our help, and they paid us back, whatever. But so the EIDL loan was just a really, really great resource that not many people realize. That the folks in Ruidoso, immediately I thought about them. Right, their businesses are impacted on top of the fires, now the flooding. Their major thoroughfares are gone. Right, so that was really. I was really glad to hear something that I've used was really well brought up. The importance of CDFIs. Are you familiar with CDFIs are?
No.
Yeah, CDFIs are, and I'm pulling up my notes. So CDFIs are recognized as community development financial institutions. And I was fortunate enough to be funded not by a CDFI program, but a lender that has a CDFI. Mm-hmm. It's a technicality, but DreamSpring. Right, they're about to celebrate their anniversary here pretty soon, and they're a prime example of the exceptional work that they do for small businesses in the community. But a CDFI, right, like OFI, which is aimed at Black entrepreneurs, they become such a, I would say, the sexy topic of the conversation because and I brought this up a lot. Like there is a lot of institutional. This is a strong word that I'm about to say, especially because, again, economic development and social justice, right? There's a lot of institutional racism behind the credit system, right? So are you a child of immigrants? Let me ask you that.
Yes.
Okay.
My mother is from Mexico.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Did your mom understand the credit system?
No, I don't think so.
No. So how do you expect a person to come to America, open up a business so that way they can live, because that's what you do in foreign countries. Mm-hmm. How do you expect them to understand the credit system if it's a system that's specific to America? So those were some of the challenges that the SBA, the U.S. Treasury, various different institutions have started to recognize. But while they can't dismantle the credit system or make it more inclusive quite yet, they can at least provide immediate access. Or federal is like, when you say immediate and federal, it's like 2 to 3 years, not 5 to 10 years, right? Is give the funding to CDFIs. So access to capital was the number one complaint from any business owner 5 to 10 years ago. now you can go to CDFI and you can have access to capital because they're not like banks. Banks are going to look at your business history, your business plan. They're going to look at what other lenders or providers, like they're going to look at pretty much your encyclopedia of the history of your business. Or you're a small business owner. I don't have that. I don't have a credit history. I felt this when I started my company. I'm like, I just have a couple contracts. Like that's all that I have is my capital, right? And so CDFIs or like really flexible community lenders, which is what the Treasury and the SBA are really pumping their money into, is that they're saying, okay, small businesses really need to consider these loans because in a CDFI, for example, they won't take a look at like your business history. They'll be like, what family history do you have with the art and craft that you're creating in your business? Mm-hmm. You mentioned that your family put up collateral for this. Like, why do they put up this collateral? Culturally speaking, what can communities do? So they look at the things that banks can't loan. And even like I spoke to even Michelle, the president of Washington Federal, right? Mm-hmm. WAFED for short. And I was
Michelle
like,
Coons.
Michelle Coons. Mm-hmm. Yes, thanks. I'm like on board with her. So I talked to Michelle. I was like, hey, Michelle, like, what do we need? What do I need to bring to Washington, D.C.? And she's like, access to capital and fund those CDFIs because there's a lot of restrictions we have on the FDIC and the bank levels that CDFIs can do. And places like DreamSpring need more money. So the banks are advocating for this. So that was big takeaway number one. And I'll keep this second part short, but the second big takeaway was that small business contracts have dropped dramatically for the government. And you think, okay, has to be defense contractor, has to do business with the government. My businesses work with the federal government. Mm-hmm. We don't have an 8A certification, which allows you to be, we're not veteran owned. My husband is a veteran, but he doesn't own the company, nor do I want him to, right? So like, what do you mean I can do business with the government? Like SAM.gov, which is the award management system, will hire anybody from coffee to stirs to printing to communications and marketing assistants. Like government contracts are on the rise and they're incentivizing federal communities to like do that. Now, something that's very common here in New Mexico is we have a lot of hub zones, a lot of women owned, and a lot of minority owned. Well, they'll like put you on the contract but not give you the work. They'll put you on the bid but they won't give you the work. Well, they're combating that now too. So that was the big takeaway that I think is like prime, like, New Mexico, like think about this. Like, yes, we have some really great federal contracts. You don't always have to do business with Kirtland Air Force Base. No. You can do them in multiple different ways. Get your certifications and just progress through it. And I'm thankful that we're recertifying so that way we can continue working with the federal government.
I want to sort of take it to, maybe some unique challenges that New Mexico small businesses face. New Mexico is very much so a small business state, right? I think like nearly 99% of businesses here in the state are considered small businesses. As a small business owner here in Albuquerque, I mean, and, in chatting with others, I know you're a part of the business community. I mean, what are some immediate challenges that business owners are facing right now?
Nobody's talking about the economy is really sucking right now.
Yeah.
I ask a lot of business owners around the community right now. I'm like Q1 it's not specific to New Mexico. It's actually happening nationwide, but nobody's talking about it. And I understand why. It's an election year, et cetera. But like, ask a business owner, did you crush your Q1 or Q2 goals? 75% of them I talked to so far were like, absolutely not. It was offensive. It was bad. And people are not talking about the spend that we're used to in the last 2 to 3 years is not what it used to be. And then on top of that, inflation. And then on top of that, government regulations that make it difficult to do business. Like, it's just not, it hasn't been that easy. So, but specific to New Mexico, I think this access to capital situation is like huge, right? And another thing we didn't get to talk about is the small business, the SSBCI, which is the State Small Business Credit Initiatives.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So how I can tie that into like how it's unique to New Mexico is the fact that in New Mexico, we have a certain grit that not a lot of business owners have across the country. Like, we are scrappy. We are innovative. Our family is behind it. Like, a lot of the Asian businesses are opening up their business because it's their livelihood. It's not just a job for them. And so the Asian business community is a perfect example of like that relentless work ethic that sometimes we forget. Oh, crap, I have to get an accountant. Oh, I need HR. Oh, what are taxes and why do I have to pay so much on payroll and state GRT? Like, how do I navigate this? So that is very unique to New Mexico because you have a large percentage of businesses that they know the process, but those that don't know how to get out of it, or they don't know how to get into it. Part of the reason why ABC was created, but part of the reason why the state small business credit initiative is actually giving money to various different economic development entities. And in our case in New Mexico, what we learned in DC, what we learned in New Mexico is that it's actually going through the state's economic development department. So that's great, right? Like they are looking for people to help people with accounting. That is that is something that you're like, it's kind of like a water heater, right? You're like, do I really need to maintain the water heater in my home? You're like, no, you really should maintain your water heater in your home. And so that's what accounting is like. Do I really need an accountant? Yes, you really need an accountant. It may seem so foreign and so confusing that some New Mexican businesses don't have that, but I see it day in and day out whenever I'm working with small businesses. So I would say like that relentless grit to figure it out, to do your business is very unique to New Mexico. But the challenges that we face are not indifferent than what the rest of the other countries receiving. So,
as far as questions go, I think that's most of what I have, Kristelle. I mean, I guess I'll leave it up to you. Is there anything you want to plug? I know you've had a podcast in the past that just recently ended. I mean, maybe we can chat a bit about that and what the future is.
Yeah, well, let me go back to the question of like, was there something that I think we should really think about? A lot of people have wondered, like, what happened to the Asian Business Collaborative? Like, where did it go? We've always been around, right? We've been around since 2020. We lost our funding from various different sources, but we gained it all back, which is I'm so grateful for. But like, well, what I think people forget is that the Asian community is a very powerful force when it comes to business, especially with some of these ordinances that are starting to come up that are very anti-business. But with that, or very specifically anti-Asian business. But I say that ABC is going strong. ABC is moving forward. I'm looking to transition the organization to the future of the Asian business leaders that are in our community right now, much younger and much more feisty than I am. But I think that people forget that the Asian business community is around, but people forget about the Asian community, period. So I say, like, if anybody's ever interested in learning more about the Asian Business Collaborative, visit our website, asianpibc.org. But in terms of Siarza and the podcast that you're talking about, it's still up. It's on Spotify. I miss my co-host Jace Downey. When I sat here, I was like, I missed this. But it was a great podcast. I think what I loved about Stories, Success, and stuff is that the stories that I would tell were very vulnerable. Like I talked about, addiction. We talked about addiction. We talked about how the mental health of a small business owner. We talked about grief. We talked about the things that small business owners don't talk about a lot. And I invite anybody to go on our website, siarza.com, or go to your favorite podcast channel and just take a look at it. But I miss those stories. It's kind of like my business memoir of just the random stuff. I almost said a bad word. Sorry. All the random stuff that we would experience as business owners. And we would have some business owners as well talking about, the various different joys and highs and lows of business. So that's there. I think that, I guess the last thing I would say is that small businesses are going to go through a really tough time right now. It was really motivating to go to DC and just kind of talk about what are the things that we need in our community and how our community, that the SBA really needs to look at New Mexico as just a really prime example of utilizing its resources. So I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up what happened in DC over the last couple of weeks, a couple of days. So,
well, Kristelle, thanks for joining Business Outlook, in its new form and sort of sharing your expertise and experience in DC with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. You can find this episode and all our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you enjoy our podcasts, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us continue to bring you more content like this. See the show notes for a discount on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading local news source.